Hello, in this video I would like to go through the version 3 digital print data set for internal use. To begin with, if we go into a new estimate under digital prints, the first thing we come to is the item itself. These will default to whatever you've decided to default it to. Currently it's defaulting to a custom roll print. This does set all of the values below, or the defaults. It's also dictating which type of material you're utilizing. We'll start with just a roll print and we'll discuss this a little bit more later. And this is your normal. If I'm adding 10 18 by 24s, the printer will default based off the print item. You can select whichever printer you'd like. The resolution is coming from the options within the printer. Material type, and then material. Again, all of this is defaulting based off the print item, but you can select, change it, and change which defaults you're utilizing. Below that, you'll see it's currently printing to a single-sided. I could select a back-to-back. If this material and equipment both can print double-sided, you'd get another selection for double-sided. Next to the equipment and print and materials, you'll see an information box, an I-box, and a gear. These may change shortly. The information breaks down how the material is being utilized. Those options are based off the roll length or an area only. You can break down the gaps and margins and leaders into more detail by going into subscreens, and it will just break down in more detail. The information on the printer is just going to break down all of the times and materials linked to that printer. So run times, setup times, print times, whatever there might be. If we look at the gear, this is where we can both edit existing parts or create new parts altogether. In this case, you'll see we're adding a new part, or you could select change existing part. To create a new part, we're just giving it a new name. Whatever it is we may be entering into the system. Now we are needing to select a material and a part to clone if they haven't selected one already. Give it a new name. Description to client is however you'd like to print that to the customer. Your material width and roll length. These are critical when purchasing things from a roll. Shipping weight and SKU if you're using it, and whether this material can print double-sided. The cut rate will be based off the cutter that's selected. Is it typically the fast, standard, or slow rate on that cutter? And then your cost per roll, whatever that may be. How you're going to, in cost-based pricing, if utilizing cost-based pricing, how much you're going to mark that up, either using the default, a standard multiplier, or a specific price. Once we have those determined, I'll save that. Now in this case, there's already a part called standard 17-ounce vinyl, so therefore it won't let me create the new one. I will change that. See if there's a 19 that exists. Once you've entered in a new part, you will get new part saved. You will also notice that the part to clone has turned into that new part, as well as the part on the main screen will go to the last one added by default. If we look at this on the equipment side, the gear, this particular case, you're doing the same thing, adding a new part or changing an existing part. If we're changing an existing part, you can change any of the values in the system. First is the description of the client. If this is also a cutter, we want to say the machine is a cutter, and then these are the perimeter cut speeds for slow, standard, and fast. And this relates back to the material cut speed that we looked at earlier. if it requires a material edge, such as a leader or margin. And then your quality modes. This is typically resolutions or other functions based on what type of machine it is. In this particular case, we have the resolutions, double stripe, and also with white ink. Now if we look at that, what that means, if I selected white ink, it will also pull in the white ink that's needed once I've added one. Alright, then our machine labor speeds, what they're based on. This machine setup is good for every machine that's in the system. The only variances are what the speeds are based on. Meaning if I was setting up a laminator, I would typically make these speeds based off of linear feet rather than square feet. From an implementation standpoint, if one of these predetermined values won't work for your client, you can always go in and add a new option. Just make sure the formulas are correct in their utilizations. All formulas in version 3, from an implementation standpoint, are directly on the drop-down list. Okay, since we said it was a cutter, we can also define the cut speeds, and this is the percentage change based off of from these cut speeds. So complex, standard, again, if we're looking at a cutter. Then we have our machine operation labor. In this case, it's print labor. Now we can always go in and add different types of labors. Here's the ones that are currently in the system. You can go in and add in the same manner that we added the other materials and parts, adding a new one or changing the existing. It wants to know the percentage of time manned, basically out of my run time. What percentage of that time is dedicated to labor. You can add a secondary labor. Now this may be depending on the type of equipment and what it is. For cut vinyl, you may add a weeding labor. If you add a secondary labor, you have your setup charge on that labor, 1 time per original, the minutes, as well as a square foot per hour, or depending on this function as well. In this case, I could say the weeding labor is linear feet per hour, or square foot per hour. Then we get into our materials. In this case, we're using inks. Again, this can be used a lot of different types of materials. And we'll use a standard ink, and maybe in the second material, we'll add a white ink. Now in this particular case, since we're using a white ink, you'll notice that these are at 100% and the rest are 0. If it is 0, it will not pull it in by default. If it's above 0, it will pull in one of these material, and this applies to both materials. So if I said this was a 0 and I chose high, it would not pull in the standard ink either. Then we get to our setup charges or fixed times. These are times that are not related to a quality or a difficulty level. These can be anything, 1 time per original, and again, if something else needed to be applied from an implementation standpoint, these are the formulas that go along with each one selected. Then we get to our cost on the equipment and our multipliers in the same way we handle material. That brings us back up to the print item. If we look at a print item, there are 2 things we can set the defaults for on this print item. One is all of the fields that you're currently looking at on this main screen. If we save it from here, it's going to save whatever options we've selected in with this print item. If we look inside the print item setup, here again we can add a new part or change an existing one. What you want to do. We have the name, the description of the client, and a pricing method. Currently, all pricing, area-based pricing methods are based off of this print item. So I could say that this pricing method is area-based. I have a fixed charge. I could charge per original per square foot, or you'd like. At $3.50 a square foot, if we wanted to charge for scrap, you can do that as well, or any of the other options. If you've set up a price table in the system, you can link the price table name into here. Select how the result of that table will be applied per square foot. And then if that table exists, it will use this pricing in addition to any other area-based pricing. Company UDF. If you've set up a UDF on the client, on the customer record, you can apply that UDF name here and what it's based on. And if that company record, this is has something filled in, meaning it's greater than 0, it will pull that value from the company UDF and use that price rather than any of the other prices. Also on the item, you can set up a default discount. If I wanted to say this is custom roll prints and I just wanted to clone it and say wholesale roll prints or some type of specialty, I could say then I'm just on this particular type of item, it gets a 10% discount, and that's what will reflect on the order as a 10% discount. You could also say it's so much per piece, per total quantity, and again, these are just values in a list that can be added. There's also an advanced rule that works off of a formula. This is something an implementer, at least for a new client, would have to set up. And this is to do advanced rules in pricing, such as at over $500 base price, it's going to give a 10% discount, and over $1,000, it's going to give a 15% discount. Again, these are just some examples of what can be set up using an advanced rule in pricing. The next thing I want to talk about are the additional processes. I'm going to go back into our order and we'll come back to setting these as well. If I'm in my order, I've now done the print, and now let's say we need to laminate that print. So I'll go into lamination, and again it's going to take this item, is defaulting to whatever item I've selected within this item, within the parent item. It's just filtering that down. That way I can select that a particular type of print item gets a particular type of laminate. And choose your laminator or hem out, whatever it is that you're doing. Lamination type and a laminate. And again, we have the single-sided or encapsulated in this case, or back-to-back. If there's a back or an adhesive. Now we can go to laminate. I'm going to jump in and cut this as well. If I go into cutting, you'll notice we're going to use a plotter. Simple. And you'll notice that the material is being pulled in from the material of the parent, because that's plotting. Now this lamination and cutting item are actually the exact same product as the digital print item. If we expand upon it and look at the large form for laminating, you'll notice lamination as an item, the laminator will be set up in the same way as the printer. Just depends on the option selected. And same with cutting, or any of the other options for that matter. They all work the same way. Okay, if I go back into the print item, so from here I can define these automatically open when every time I choose a custom roll print. I wanted to save it that way, and what lamination item will open by default, what type of cutting, and if there's any other options needed. A couple other options you'll see throughout the system. If I look down the left, I'm on the line items, the options page. This will be your modifier grid, a miscellaneous option, and the multi-quantity grid. You'll also get a totals tab. This totals tab will run down all of the prices, both in the parent and children, and cost. If I wanted to overwrite this entire product, meaning currently my square footage is at 5 or I'm at $15 a piece, if I just wanted to say that these are $20 a piece, I can do that and then include in base. This way it will zero out all the children and say all of those are included in my $20 unit price. A few other options you'll see within the system. If I look at the product setup, the gear at the top right, a couple things you can save with the product itself. One is what the default item is, meaning when I first open this product, what is it going to display by default, will be saved within this component. You can also display large units, display originals, or change the names of what you'd like them to show as far as material types, materials, items, print equipment. Again, this is the same form or same product throughout for whichever product you're choosing or subproduct. So therefore this just allows you to change the name on the form itself for they can share the same form. The display originals, of course, like version 2, will show the originals in quantity, and large will show feet and inches as well. And this can be defined by product. This concludes our short video on the digital print product within V3.